Two geniuses, one collision. The world's Kurosawa versus the legendary Katsu Shin. What really happened behind the scenes of Kagemusha? Witness the clash of egos, unseen footage, and the raw, untamed life of the blind swordsman. The legend starts now.
We smuggled this into, he was, as you may know, involved in some difficulties with the police about an opium bust that he was involved in. And he had extracted from me a promise to show him a cut of the film before he mixed it, so that he could object violently to things that he hated, and I promised to do something about them. And we took him to print to see in his hotel room where he was hiding out from the media and so on. And he began to watch the film. Everybody was very nervous. All the yes men and so on were standing around, and he, halfway through, turned around and said, marvelous, or something like that. And I was very worried and upset that he would insist that I delete the section of the film about his wife and children, which to me is a very cruel and unhappy sequence in the film, which he said nothing about. The only objection that he had was in the disco scene. There's one place where he is kissing Mitsuko Baisho rather aggressively, and she is the wife of the wrestler Antonio Inoki, the fellow who fought Ali when he went to Japan. And he asked that I remove that 20-second cut from the disco scene. That was all. And I questioned him about whether that was all he had to say, and he said yes, and raced right home and mixed the film. And he said that he felt as if he'd encountered himself for the first time. And he said to me, he had tears in his eyes, and said, I'm really rather a beautiful guy. And I, of course, in fact, agree with that in many ways, although perhaps many of you don't. That's what he thought, at any rate.
Other questions? Yeah.
The general American audience reaction to this particular film? When it's shown in conjunction with the other two parts of this series, there's always a kind of bummed out silence that occurs just after this one goes off. I think people are in certain ways abused and offended by the man's egomaniacal male chauvinism, power trip, and so on. I think that, in fact, there's Japanologists, for example, are very angry because they say it has nothing to do with Japan, and this man might as well have been Clint Eastwood, which is, I think, totally ridiculous. In general, I say some people have difficulty with the film and feel that he's an unsympathetic and uninteresting character. I don't know how you feel. I feel he's a very interesting and sympathetic man, a lonely man with a lot of talent and tremendous energy, which I admire. How do you feel? Well, the question is, do I feel there was a need to make this film? This is part 2 of a 3-part series about Japan. And since the first part is about a family of Tokyo caterers and a very benign look at downtown Tokyo life, and part 3 is about a North Japan farm family. It's a kind of dark study of the farm woman, essentially. I wanted very badly to put virulence into the series. I wanted a Japanese heavy, someone whom I had tremendous difficulty with in my own life, because I wanted people to see that there are Japanese heavies of this particular frequency and modality, and I have a kind of ambivalent admiration for this man. So I wanted him, because I feel that he, although he's difficult and often impossible and often outrageous, nonetheless represents certain kinds of 18th century Japanese values that persist into modern Japanese society on one hand, and that he's also an artist on the other. I felt there was a need for me to make the film. I don't know whether it's an objective need to make it. I don't know if there's objective anything, you know.
Jeremy Larder had a comment here.
Jeremy?
I just wanted to say that it reminded me of some of the directors we've seen come here. It poses the question, why is it that when a man is successful in any way seems to utter a commonplace as if it were a tremendously profound discovery off his own? I mean, I expected him to say at almost any moment, I too went up a river.
Well, he is guilty of certain severe pomposity if you're not asking me to explain the humanical quality of American directors, Jeremy, surely.
I saw, I mean, is this 18th century Japanese or is it 20th century medium?
Well, this man's kind of gangsterly concern for the people around him, which may or may not have communicated itself to you in the course of the film, and his power, which comes from an unremitting belief in himself, which I personally have a great deal of trouble in assuming about my own person, is to me admirable, and I think he does interesting work, and I think that, what shall I say, I can't pretend that he's a nice, modest man, and I would agree with you that he is capable of being hyperbolic and overblown in a way which is off-putting. I asked you to see that he is also a character worthy of sympathy and often of interest with regard to his energy as a creative person. I don't know whether you felt that or not. You may just hate him. I don't.
What's he like when he's alone?
I've never been with him when he's alone. As a matter of fact, I have a strong feeling that he hates to be alone and that he takes steps to ensure that he never is alone. And in the time that I've known him, he never was alone.
The film shows that.
He's a lonely man who's terrified of being alone, in fact. Yeah.
Is he as completely responsible for the artistic production as the film suggests?
The question is he completely responsible for the artistic,
For all aspects of the
for
art?
all aspects of the production of the film? Yes, he is. These films are not very good. These are television productions, which are often quite terrible. He operates without a script, on a kind of remote control sense of what the Zatoichi character is like and what his special takes are like. And the crew is entirely confused, and his actors are often entirely confused, and he races around making up things as he goes along. In the better Zatoichi features, which he also had considerable control over, I think you can see something which is much more interesting and evolved. But the answer to the question is yes. His staff refers to him as owner. And they use a Japanese word, an English word, which is rarely used in Japan about someone except for a racetrack mogul. And he does have that kind of tyrannical control over everything he does. Yeah.
How does he course his actual skill and background into
His skill and background in swordplay, he's not a very good swordsman. And is not a kendo student or anything of the kind. I mean, over the last 16 years, as he's done feature film after feature film about Zatoichi, he's learned to handle the sword well enough so that it looks pretty good on camera, but he's not a great swordsman by any means.
When and where is your part three to be shown?
I'm sorry?
When and where is
When and where is the part three? Well, we're going to show the other two parts here in January, Farm Song and the Full Moon Lunch, and you'll see it on our schedule. And the next film we're showing on the second Zatoichi film in the series was probably pretty early in the series, and he probably didn't have as much artistic control as later, right?
Much less to do. The film we're going to see now, which is the second of the, I suppose, 30 finally Zatoichi features, it's still a black and white film, and they're still sort of feeling out the Zatoichi style, and Katsu had much less to do with it than he did with the subsequent films in the series.
Do you find his behavior with Kurosawa now to be admirable? I mean, to give you the background, he was the star of the current Kurosawa film, and he had a big fight with Kurosawa and was fired, and it had to do with the fact that he insisted on videotaping all the rehearsals in the film, and he said that he wanted to do it because, as I heard, he wanted to improve his performance, but then Kurosawa found out that he wanted to do it so that later he could use the tapes in his acting school he wanted to open, and claimed he had exclusive tapes of Kurosawa. If this is true, do you find that part of his admirable character?
I don't know the details of this story, and I hate to find myself in a position of having to defend Shintaro Katsu as a man of his word, a man of honor, everything else. It strikes me as uncharacteristic of him that he would lie to Kurosawa about something which regarded subsequent earnings. He doesn't seem to me to be primarily a businessman. I was very upset that he had to fight with Kurosawa because he's a man who's surrounded by second-rate yes men who have held him in a kind of place which he has very difficulty in overcoming. And I thought he could learn something and maybe break into another sphere of film activity. And I'm upset that he had this fight. That's all I really can say. I don't know the story myself. Yeah. The next one is a black and white film. Yeah. It's a drag. Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's usual for Japanese to become tranquilized when they get drunk. You consider Japan an emotionally repressive society, and its constant reaction, religious reaction, unusual among Japanese.
That was a complicated sociological question. To wit, the gentleman has heard that Japanese become tranquilized when they're drunk ordinarily. Do I consider Japan an emotionally repressive society, and is Katsu's aggression therefore untypical? Is that right? I don't really know the answer to the question. I can repeat it with a certain fluency. He combines his liquor with various kinds of drugs, speed and everything else he can get his hands on, so that it may be that his increasing activity in the course of an evening where he drinks himself into a kind of stupor is not typical of the ordinary Japanese drunk who doesn't have access to the drugs that Katsu uses. I do consider Japan an emotionally repressive society, but I consider our society emotionally repressive as well. I think the symptoms are different than the cause. Anything else that I can...
More questions?
Do you like him or what? Hate him?
I find him a really interesting guy. I mean, the thing that strikes me is that it seems, you're detailing that one night where he goes out and makes himself sick the next day. I mean, if he's doing that all the time, which you suggest...
He is doing it all the time, yeah.
I mean, he could have learned something from Kurosawa, at least, in adding years to his life. It seems that he's really going to kill himself.
It seems he's going to burn himself out. It has to be said in his favor, I suppose, that he's able the next day to work against his hangover and everything else he has with a kind of fierce concentration that he's capable of, But I'll stop there. I mean, I really sound like Katsu's publicity man. I didn't mean to do that. Yes, sir.
Does he ever work without anything in him?
Has he ever worked without anything in him?
Any liquid encouragement or anything like that? Has he ever
I don't know. He doesn't ordinarily drink during the day. He's not really an alcoholic by
Did
Japanese
anyone ever try to
standards.
suggest that to him?
Sorry?
Did anyone ever suggest that to him?
Suggest that he...
Work without anything?
Well, I believe that when he works, he may be hungover, but he's not drinking. He drinks at night and works during the day. Ordinarily.
Did he, since you were very familiar with Mishima and translated his works, did Katsu know Mishima? Did you ever ask him what he thought of Mishima? Did they have any contact?
Katsu had admiration for Mishima's final days, as you might expect him to do. I don't think they knew each other very well, although they may have met occasionally, but he once did tell me that he thought there was a magnificent end, which is something you'd expect him to say, really. Yes?
Richard?
Yeah, okay. I just have a question about you. How long have you spent in Japan? Because I noticed your Japanese is very good. And how did you meet Katsu?
Well, I spent on and off probably a dozen years or so in Japan, and I met Katsu originally when he was starring in a film by a director named Hiroshi Teshigahara called Man Without a Map, which is rather dreadful. It's part 3 in the trilogy of Abe Kobo, which begins with Woman of the Dunes. And I'd known him on and off for a number of years, and when I decided that I wanted a tough and difficult man to do for one of these films in this series, I went to him and asked him if he would allow me to make a film about him, and after a good deal of haranguing and difficulty in dealing, he said yes.
You may have answered this already, but why have you chosen this particular film behind showing rather than saying later?
Well, I chose that, I think, talking to him, but I thought it would be interesting to really, having seen him today, where he is, to go back and see one of the very first films in the series to see, what were the films that created his popularity and inspired people to want to produce, sequel after sequel.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting. I haven't seen this film myself. I don't think I'm looking forward to doing it. Why don't we just...
And, we have to take a break a minute. And other people have told me that, I've seen some of them, but most people seem to think that the earlier films are better, that, that got a little bit burnt out and tired later on in the series.
Well, there are only so many takes you can do when you're blind and have to kill 30 or 40 people with a sword. And I think the best ones start after 4 or 5 films into the series, but I don't know what this one is like, so I'm looking forward to seeing it.
And we will all see it together. We'll be back at the end, and now we have a little bit of a break, and hope you all stay. Thanks. He's here.
I have nothing to say whatsoever about that.
Well, maybe we can talk. Maybe there's, maybe there's some questions about Katsu in general, or Zatoichi, or the series. Before, those of you who are still here, by the way, this film was much shorter than the original film that we announced, so we have more time before the John's film goes on, so we're going to not make you wait here for the film. We're going to show another short. We have a new short film upstairs that I'm told is very good from Yugoslavia, so we're going to show that after the question period, and then at 9:30 his film will go on in case there are people out there just coming for that. We didn't want to start it earlier and have people come and get angry at us for starting it too early. So there'll be movies. But how do you find this one in context of the whole series?
Boring.
Why did you switch?
Actually, I think it's amazing that how the character evolves in the course of the 25 pictures that they had to work on it. I mean, I really do. And this was, I guess, the second, right?
Yes, second.
By the time they're getting up to picture 6, 7, and 8, where Katsu is taking more responsibility, and they've got some sound effects in there for the sword, and the character's getting a little nihilistic and never involved as entirely with a woman as he is in this film. And the script writing is getting a little better. It becomes a much better series, and I think Katsu had a lot to do with it, actually. I thought this was very primitive and uninteresting, actually. I don't know how you feel.
How do people feel? Yeah. He's not really blind, actually. No.
Why did you switch a film?
Well, we explained that at the beginning. You weren't here? No. The other film was stuck in Seattle, and the point was to show, that was the first film we were going to show, an even earlier film, and we wanted to show with his documentary about Katsu as he is today and superstar. We wanted to show one of the films from the very beginning of the series to give you an idea of where he came from.
Maybe some background might interest you. Katsu was trained, as you'll see if you stay to see this thing I did, to be a musician. His father's a founder of a school of shamisen playing, and I think in 1953 or so he went to the United States for the first time with his father's troupe of musicians, having grown up and debuted actually on the Tokyo stage as a shamisen player and a singer of classical Japanese songs. And on his way back he stopped in Hollywood and met James Dean, who was then at the height of his career, and Katsu was so impressed that he went back to Tokyo and told his father he didn't want to be a shamisen player, he wanted to be an actor. And he apprenticed himself to the Dai Studios, the studios that made most or more than half of the subsequent Zatoichi series. And for about 4 or 5 years he played the sort of second romantic leads, kind of a good-looking boy who would get involved with a girl and get beaten up or killed at the end of the film. They had at that time a Japanese actor named Ichikawa Raizo, who died very young of cancer, who was the big romantic lead, and a couple of other people in whose shadow Katsu had to sort of forbear for a number of years. And then in 1961, a Japanese novelist was traveling around north of Tokyo in a district of Japan called Chiba, and heard this legend about the blind masseur gambler who was said to have wandered around Japan 100 or so years earlier, and in particular a kind of gang feud in which this blind masseur played a very active role, had this fantastic sword, and he wrote a treatment and took it to Dai, and Katsu was not being considered for the part actually, and it turned out that his shamisen teacher had been blind. He'd learned to play the shamisen from an old member of his father's troupe who was a blind man and was confident he could do a blind role, and they gave him a shot at it. The first film was a sort of modest success. And this way, they still haven't committed themselves to color when they've done this, and I think probably starting from film 3, maybe it's film 4, I don't know, they go into color, and the thing becomes an enormous box office smash. They made 2 of them a year for, I guess, close to 15 years, one at New Year's and one during the Obon, the August Festival of the Dead period. A couple of years they did 3, and they do get, in fact, better and better to about the halfway point. And after that, they begin to, I think, decline in interest because Katsu has already thought of just about every imaginable change on the way in which a blind guy can chop up people and be funny in the gambling hall and be clever and sort of fatalistic about his fate and all the rest of it. But he did produce 5 or 6 of those films in the middle section of the series, which are well worth seeing, I think.
He's directed a film or two that have nothing to do with the Blind Samurai also, hasn't he?
Yeah. He starred in several series of films, some of which he directed and some of which he didn't. Actually, his one serious effort is a film called Kaoyaku. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's a film about gangsters, which is 2.5 hours long, all close-ups of real. He got some of his real gangster friends in Osaka and to play all the gangsterly parts. It's quite a boring film. It's a kind of homage to Teshinahara Hiroshi effort, but I don't think he's a great director really. But I think he's a very good actor.
Any other questions about?
As an old samurai warrior, I was wondering why they never wiped their sword before shooting.
Now they do in fact wipe their swords customarily with some sort of charmin, which they keep inside the fold of their kimono. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Why they didn't wipe their swords after they?
Why didn't wipe them at all?
They're supposed to wipe their swords. Actually, maybe these guys were some low-rent guys who were involved in this particular film. But as it goes into color, they do start wiping.
The Revenge of Zatoichi, sort of stumbling out drunk through most of the scenes. I saw it. I don't know if I have otherwise. But I was wondering, what was that in the second half that you're talking about?
No, Zatoichi always refers to this character, the blind masseur, the swordsman. He wouldn't have played a stumbling drunk.
No, I'm saying he played this character, but he seemed to be drunk through most of the film. He was sort of stumbling through the whole thing, not as a blind man.
Well, in many of the films, he does in fact get drunk for some, I don't know how many minutes in the course of the hour and a half film. Maybe you came in sort of just the beginning of it drunk and left at the end. I don't know. But I don't think I remember when she was drunk for most of the film. Well, you'll see that if you stay and see the film that I made about Katsu now, but these things are very carefully choreographed, and the choreography involving this particular kind of blind swordsmanship got more and more highly evolved as he went on, until in the middle films in the series you see some really very spectacular balletic blind swordsmanship. They use blunted swords, yes. He has one cane sword which doesn't remove itself at all, one which comes out as blunted, and then he has one which is actually edged, which he uses for close-ups, so that when they bring the camera in close you can see that it's sharp. But even so, it's quite dangerous, and in the course of the making of these films, a lot of people are always hurt because the blade is quite heavy, even though it's not edged.
Is this style made up in film, or is that an actual style?
No, this style of swordplay actually is called iai nuki, which means that it's a style of virtuoso swordsmanship in which the blade is removed from the scabbard and something is cut more swiftly than the eye can follow. The thing is returned very quickly into the scabbard. And today, this thing is still done in exhibitions, and it's very dangerous because the Japanese sword is very heavy, as you know. If you just rest it on your hand, the weight of the blade will in fact cut. So to swing the thing at anything and then to quickly put it back into the scabbard is to risk removing your own hand at the wrist. And so this actually derives in a classical style of Japanese swordsmanship, and there are many, many very fine tricks and sort of Zatoichi shtick, which he evolved over the years, in which you see him doing some fantastic things more quickly than the eye can follow. One of my favorites is a famous section in which he always comes to visit and pay his respects to the local the tough boy like this Kanbei in this film. And there's always one maverick swordsman who is around and who waits to see how the action is going to occur, and then at the very end comes up and challenges Katsu to one final battle after he's dispatched 40 or 50 or however many desperados and so on. And in one of my favorite films, he comes to pay his respects to the local boss, and he's playing chess, Go actually, on a big thick Go board in one corner of the room. And the young man who is going to be the final challenger comes up and sees that it's Zatoichi, and Zatoichi is very humble, and he presents himself, and and the young guy comes up with his sword, and they draw, and something happens, and you hear Zatoichi's sword leaving the scabbard and being returned very quickly, and the edge of the wooden scabbard falls off. That is, the young tough has in fact succeeded in chopping off a couple of inches of Zatoichi's scabbard. Zatoichi bows and gets up and goes out, and the young guy is there saying, "Did you see that?" And the boss says, "I don't know how tough you are, I think he's equally tough," and he drops a stone down on this 1.5 foot thick go board, and it falls in two. So that's the kind of thing which Katsu is very good at contriving, and if you like that, you can watch it and enjoy it. What can I say?
What's it like with the Japanese audience? Are they very involved in cheering?
Yes, they do get very involved, and of course, what's hard for the Western audience is there's a lot of Stella Dallas interwoven throughout the action. You know, a lot of the old people whom the blind swordsman suspects may be his father in disguise, or the old people who sing songs which remind him of his childhood, which take him down a whole kind of lachrymose and melancholic side alley of the story, which the Japanese love. This whole tradition of film relates to sort of Japanese shimpa, you know, comes out of a kind of deconstituted kabuki theater tradition, and you have to like teary, soap operatic stuff to follow some of the central part of the film. So it's hard for Western audiences, I think, often to enjoy the thing as thoroughly as the Japanese audience does. But they do get very excited about the final battles and the showdowns, so we do.
Speaking of audiences, what sort of audiences do these attract? And young people or all ages?
This particular man is, and this is something that always surprised me. The question is, what kind of audience does Zatoichi attract? Katsu has a following which is astonishing in the range of its age. That is, he had very young people who go to these films and like them, and there are lots of old people who love him too. I don't think there's much evidence actually in this film for you to begin to see what kind of an attraction he may have, but as the series evolves, he becomes a kind of wry, often resigned, very philosophical Zatoichi, which he isn't here yet. And that in combination with Katsu's own persona, which is capable of being very gentle and very interested in old people and very charismatic generally, even though you may consider him a gross out, produced an enormous number of middle-aged to older fans all over the country. And when he travels around the provinces, as I did with him often, it's often we've encountered old women coming up and weeping with joy and touching him and wanting to talk to him, wanting to hear him play his shamisen, and just wanting to know what Katsu had to say. And so it's quite remarkable. He has a wide range of followers.
I heard that he made a movie with Shiro Mukumi. Is that true? Or?
Yes, it is. Katsu made one of these films with Mifune, in which Mifune is absolutely ghastly. It's called Zatoichi Meets Yojimbo. And it's Mifune's worst performance, I think.
Say things like, "This is the boss," or "He's a tough hombre."
Well,
what's the music behind this?
Well, you must understand that the boss and the hombre and all that stuff, it comes from the big film studios have the English Translation Bureau. These are the subtitles which are misleading. They're making that stuff sound as ghastly as it does. If you're asking about the eclectic nature of the music and all that, that's true of all modern Japanese art. You know, the film, the entertainment business has been very influenced by our own, so that the macaroni western is very important. When I played the Zatoichi theme music for a person the other day, he said that was a direct steal. The music, I didn't know. I thought it was sort of macaroni western kind of music. You'll hear it in my film. He said, "Oh, that was stolen note for note from a television series which he said he produced called The Rebel in this country." And he was amazed to hear that they hadn't even bothered to invert or change or drop a measure or anything else. It was just the same sort of thing with a few Japanese electric guitars. So it's just imitation. It's a hybrid kind of music which has evolved in the last sort of 30 years. Some Japanese elements in it and a lot of Western elements included.
Of course, the spaghetti western was originated partly in copying Yojimbo, Fistful of Dollars, so it goes back and forth. Are there any last questions about anything here? What year did they start to go downhill?
I don't remember precisely what year, but I really can't tell you. There are some good ones which were made in the latter half of the series as well. You have to watch directors. There are about 10 directors who worked on these things over the years, and Katsu has directed himself maybe 5 of them out of the 28 or 9 that were made. They're not necessarily the best. In fact, several of them I think are not at all good because they were toward the end and he was tired and so on. I really can't tell you. I have to go. You have to just watch it. You pay your money and take your chances. I'm afraid.
Okay, so I urge you all to stay and see The Blind Swordsman, which is 1 hour. But in about 5 minutes, we'll show a 15-minute short. Don't ask me even to tell you the title, but it's a prize-winning short from Yugoslavia that we just got. And then in January, we'll show 2 other films that John made from the same series on the Japanese.
What's the title?
The title in January? Full Moon Lunch is one of his films, and Farm Song is it Farm Song? The title? Yeah, Farm Song is the other. And they're each 1 hour, and you'll see them in our January calendar. Thanks a lot.